Spirit of life, Spirit of love, God of many names. This community and other communities in our land all have some suffering that they're going through. Help us to get through that. Help us to help them to get through that. Let us remember all the joys that human beings can experience. The joys of going to the UN, the joys of birthdays and anniversaries that may not have been expressed today. And let us keep in our hearts those sorrows of people passing away, of people leaving us when we don't understand, of people losing jobs or homes. Let us keep them all in our hearts. As a community, let us take our love out into the world. Blessed be. Amen. I saw Denny Hamlin on a talk show a couple of weeks ago. He had just won the Daytona 500, and they were talking about this metaphysical experience he had. When he was 7 years old in second grade, he wrote a letter and said in it that he would win the Daytona 500 on February 17th, 1998. He won the Daytona 500 on February 17th, 2019. The exact date, but 21 years later. Of course, the talk show host really played this up as some kind of premonition or deep will that he would win on the exact day that he wrote as a child. They failed to mention that he first won the Daytona 500 on February 21st, 2016, but to win a second time on the exact date he wrote as a 7-year-old child, well, that was some kind of a sign. Then he spoke of Joe Gibbs Racing, who he actually drives for. When he was 12 years old, he stood in line with him in an event, and he told Joe Gibbs that one day he would drive for him. He signed a contract with him in 2004 and has been driving for his organization ever since. His comments on the show said that he believes he manifested these events as a child, and his message to kids everywhere is that you can manifest what it is you want, and you can make it happen. I was sitting eating my breakfast that morning, and I smiled. I have heard people do this, and sometimes I believe it, and sometimes I don't. What I've noticed, though, is that when I do believe it, uncannily, it actually happens. When I don't believe it, it never happens. I watched this episode and thought of the times where I felt that this did happen for me. When I was working in LA, I had a coworker who firmly believed in metaphysics, and she took the part she believed in the most as her belief system, the relationship between mind and matter. She discarded any other parts of this philosophy and focused on how her mind could bring her the things she wished. It was a couple of years before the book and the movie The Secret came out, and her wish for material goods was undeniably potent. She gave me a book written by Esther and Jerry Hicks, where they write about this group of entities they call Abraham, that they communicate with and interpret the meaning of their message. They also had something to do with The Secret years later, but this was after my coworker was attempting to get me interested in this philosophy. I had been wanting to buy a condo, but really didn't think I had the funds to do it. I still had this dream, and a friend of mine was a realtor, and one day when I was talking with her, she said, "You'd be surprised. Let's look around and see what we can see." I began this trek in search of a condo, and things began to fall into place. My parents added to my down payment so that I could actually have enough for a down payment. And after looking at 50 condos, I finally made an offer. Now, this was 1998, when it was much easier to buy a condo in Los Angeles and in California than it is now. My coworker was convinced I had manifested this. She was in awe and a little jealous that my idea turned into reality. I, on the other hand, was thrilled that for the first time as a woman alone, this was after I was divorced, I owned property. I had owned a house previously with an ex-boyfriend, but this was mine, and mine alone. And I had the freedom to do with it whatever I wanted. It truly felt like freedom. When all of this happened, I could see how her belief in metaphysics could be possible. Something had happened. Something had changed in me to make this happen. I began to believe. I do not come from a family of optimists. In fact, I'm probably the only one. My mom used to call me Pollyanna growing up because I always saw the bright side, she said. I just couldn't understand why people thought the worst would happen. And over time, living in this family, I began to think like they did. I saw my life not going as I planned and began to believe that that was just the way the world was. That bad things happened to good people and that construct couldn't be changed. Because of this upbringing, I have gone back and forth in my life believing in possibility and then believing in lack of opportunity. I married a pessimist. And this continued the schooling my parents gave me in lack of opportunity and impossibility of outcome. I went back and forth through the years, much of the time believing that good things happen for others, but not for me. But when I look back on my life, there has been so much that has gone as I wished it to go. After my divorce and living in St. Louis, Missouri, I had always wanted to live in California. My brother and I ended up taking a driving vacation out to California one year and spent 2 weeks driving his new Trans Am out here and back. When I returned, I was laid off from my manager's position and had thought then, well, if I'm going to look for a job, I might as well look for one in California. So I packed up 3 suitcases when they were all free when you brought them on the airlines and flew to San Diego first, staying with a sister of my brother's ex-girlfriend until I could get settled. And I remained in California for the next 30 years. I moved around a lot, but basically had the opportunities to live in all the major cities in California during those 30 years before I moved back to the East Coast. Because I believed I could. I was able to buy my condo because I began to believe I could. When I lived in Sacramento one year, I decided I wanted to backpack through Italy. So I worked overtime and saved my money, and I did just that. It was the first vacation I ever took solo. I had decided that I wanted to take a vacation all on my own to see what it was like. And I spent 5 weeks traveling a bit through Austria and then from Venice down to Sorrento in Italy. My parents were terrified some horrible thing would happen to me, but it didn't, because I believed, and I had the time of my life. I read a website recently written by a blogger, Sophia Smith, called A Lust for Life, on optimism versus pessimism. She states, optimistic people differ from pessimists in 3 specific things. They believe that negative events are temporary and limited in scope and have internal causes. In contrast, pessimistic people believe that any negative event will pervade their entire life, has external causes, and will last forever. Changing yourself from a pessimist to an optimist requires you to be conscious of a situation when you are having negative thoughts. She began a practice of asking herself 3 questions when she began to become self-defeating or pessimistic. Did the recent event happen because of me, internal causes, or because of something or someone else, external causes? Is the event a temporary occurrence, or will it last forever? Does it affect my whole life, or is it only a solitary occurrence affecting one aspect of my life? She would do a type of meditation before that and then sit down to reflect on these questions. Again, they are: did the recent event happen because of me, internal causes, or because of something or someone else, external causes? Is the event a temporary occurrence, or will it last forever? Does it affect my whole life, or is it only a solitary occurrence affecting one aspect of my life? If a problem has internal causes, there is a solution. If the issue is caused by external forces, no matter how hard you try, you will not be able to change the circumstances you are in. This means acceptance of what is and allowing of what is to just be. It's a process, but cultivating acceptance and allowing of what is truly helps. To me, this reminds me of the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, external forces, courage to change the things I can, internal forces, and the wisdom to know the difference. Many a time I have had to say that prayer to myself to distinguish what I had control over and what I did not. She also cites a study that she read conducted by Barbara Fredrickson, a positive psychology researcher at the University of North Carolina. She used a broaden and build theory of positive emotions that asserts that people's daily experiences of positive emotions compound over time to build a variety of consequential personal resources. In layman's terms, the more you believe you can, the more you can. During her experiment, Ms. Fredrickson divided participants into 5 groups. Each group was shown different clips to watch. The 2 groups were given 2 clips dealing with positive emotions of joy and contentment. The other 2 groups were shown clips portraying fear and anger. The 5th group watched a clip producing no significant emotion. The participants were asked to imagine themselves in the same situation and to write down on a piece of paper what they would do. Those who watched positive emotions had the highest number of responses, even more than the neutral group. Individuals who were shown negative emotion clips had the fewest responses. The results of the study, she said, demonstrate that negative self-talk can make you see fewer possibilities and opportunities in life. In these situations, you can only think of the negative event. The rest of the world, together with more positive aspects of the situation, does not matter. The only thing you can do is to take a pause and take a deep breath in order to become conscious of your thoughts. That is where mindfulness comes in. We must be mindful of our thoughts all the time. If we notice that we are having a negative reaction to an event or a conversation or a relationship or just something happening in our lives, we need to be mindful of how we are reacting to them. For this is how patterns are formed. And once that pattern is formed, it can be difficult to sometimes reform it. I was able to reform my pattern when I moved away from my family. Sad to say, but it took distance and independence to create a new pattern of optimism for me. In a quote by Nietzsche, translated by Daniel Pellerin, he states, "Any human being who does not wish to be part of the masses need only stop making things easy for himself. Let him follow his conscience, which calls out to him, 'Be yourself,